People need to know what they put in their bodies. They need to make informed choices. And the problem is that oftentimes they're very misinformed because there is no organized place to find out what's good for me. Contradictory data, all kinds of diets, fads, incomplete information, so on and so forth. So the obvious solution was, let's organize the world's food knowledge, give it back to people so they can make the right food choices.
Welcome to the Digital Healthcast, a podcast where we interview healthcare pioneers innovating modern-day medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Mwata Dyson. Everyone has heard the message that eating well is fundamentally tied to your well-being. Yet when it comes time to decide what to eat, that message is often misunderstood. We live in a very fast-paced and stressful world. Sometimes we make ill-informed dietary decisions. Sometimes they're due to cost, and sometimes they're due to convenience. Sometimes they're due to the mere fact that the foods that are so bad, well, they make us feel so good. Processed and fatty foods, well, they can be addictive. But the same can be true for healthy and nutritional foods, especially if you have the right practices in place. One of my favorite quotes is, "To eat is a necessity. To eat intelligently is an art." We all need to become smarter eaters. That's why I'm glad to have with us as a guest on the show, Mr. Victor Penev. Victor is the CEO and founder of Edamam, a digital nutrition company that aims to help us make better food choices. Victor, I want to thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, I got to tell you, when I first saw the spelling of the name Edamam and to pronounce it, the first thing I thought about was edamame, but more enticing, more inviting. So I love the name. Can you tell me a little about the backstory of how you came up with it?
Yeah, it actually is not linked to the soybean. When starting the company, I was looking for a domain name in the .com space that is short enough, easy to spell, hard to misspell. We were looking at the time to be a business to consumer company, so we wanted to make it easy for people to find us. And I was thinking a lot about different things that are food related and nutrition related. And so, by the way, Ed is Slavic for eat. It's the root of eat. And Am is Sanskrit for food. And Adam is Arabic for good food. So all those things were kind of, jiggling around in the soup of my mind. And then one day I woke up and Edamam came up and it was free in the .com domain. And that's how I ended up with that. And a lot of people make the relation to Edamame. It's probably had something to do on a subconscious level, but that wasn't the impetus behind it.
Yeah, I could imagine. I'm quite sure he's heard this before. Someone came and asked him, "Is this short for edamame?" But I love how the synergy, especially the meaning behind all of it, kind of came into place. It seems like it was perfect. One thing I like to do before we get started and learn more about Edamame and what's under the hood, I'm very fascinated when I talk to entrepreneurs, especially in the digital health space, because what I've noticed is that they typically take a traditional problem and find an innovative solution for it, right? So help me to understand, how does someone wake up one day and decide they're going to take on food data at a global level? Like, these are some very lofty goals. Like, how does this happen?
Yeah. Oh, it's all a personal story. Obviously, when you come to a decision, it becomes very natural. Part of it is, I guess, I learned early enough in my career, and I'm a serial entrepreneur. Edamam is my fourth company, been successful, built Bulgaria's largest internet company, sold it. And that has given me time to think about what makes life meaningful, especially if you're an entrepreneur. And I forget who said it, but somebody said, if you start something that you can finish in a lifetime, it's not worth doing. So essentially, pick a goal that is bigger than your life and maybe create a movement. And that's why the global level. Why food and nutrition? For me, it's personal. I've been cooking for as long as I remember myself, maybe the last 30, 35 years, almost every day. I love food. And so when I sold my last company, the question was, what do I do next? What are the things that are interesting to me that we can solve with technology, which is another passion of mine. And the answer came, as it normally does on a beach in Thailand. And it was like, well, let's just figure out a problem in the food space that we can solve with technology. And the obvious one, I spent really 8 to 10 months thinking about it. But the first hunch that I had was the right one. Essentially, it was people need to know what they put in their bodies. They need to make informed choices. And the problem is that oftentimes they're very misinformed because there is no organized place to find out what's good for me. Contradictory data, all kinds of diets, fads, incomplete information, so on and so forth. So the obvious solution was, let's organize the world's food knowledge, give it back to people so they can make the right food choices. That became the mission of the company and is the mission of the company. And so it was just kind of the coincidence of me loving food, knowing it has to be a big goal, and thinking of, 10 years back at the state of the art of data at that time, what can we solve as a problem? That was before AI became really a thing. It was, people talked about NLP and machine learning, but yeah. So that's how it all came together.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So you mentioned you were on a beach in Thailand, and you took a year off. It sounds, in between this transition. So during that 8 to 10 months, says, okay, now the seed is in your mind. Was there one inciting event where, because I'm quite sure during this time there may have been some doubt, there may have been some challenges, but was there one inciting event where, like, you know what, I'm headstrong, I'm going to go and push forward, negligent of, not knowing what the outcomes may be?
Yeah. Again, it's a personal event, and that's what kind of the decision crystallized on that beach. I was actually in a fasting retreat in Phuket in Thailand. So 10-day no food. And at that time, when you don't eat for 10 days, you have a lot to think about food and its impact. And obviously, I experienced phenomenal health benefits of the fasting. And now it's become very top of mind for people, intermittent fasting and so on and so forth. But, 10, 11 years ago, that was on the forefront of that, let's do the long 10-day no food fast. I experienced phenomenal health benefits. And it's like, if I can bring that to everyone on the planet, that will be it. And it doesn't mean eat more or eat this or eat that. It often the answer is eat less and eat less of X or Z. So anyway, so that was the inciting event. And, that is the practice of an entrepreneur. Once you pick a road, you just have to, put a step after step and follow it. There's no too much hesitation. Obviously, you have to be aware enough of the situation so you can pivot, maybe, jump over an abyss or go around a rock, but, you kind of follow the path.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. So I guess the outcome was you were able to see how it made you feel better. Once you were able to change some things, and the idea that you could share that gift, with more people, very, very noble. When we look at the traditional system we have, and we're looking at nutritional analysis and dietary recommendations, I'm almost ashamed to say that I haven't seen a nutritionist probably in 15 years. And I don't know, many of the meal ideas that I get probably come from some social media blogger. I'm quite sure I'm not alone here. What do you see wrong in general with this traditional model of how we share dietary advice with one another and how we analyze nutrition?
Yeah, so there is quite a bit to unbundle here, but I think first and foremost is the environment and the culture, especially in the Western world, of more and more. So eating more is the equivalent of having more, bigger house, better car, more higher paying job and whatnot. And it's just the way we are brought up from day one, compete, win, get more, and this type of thing. So unfortunately, that's the way to get killed slowly by food, So I think the number one thing is actually portion control. And so if there were enough voices out there just to say you have to eat less, I think we'll make huge strides. And after that, there is obviously the composition of what you eat. There is enough knowledge now that organic, plant-based food generally promotes health, well-being, longevity, so on and so forth. And then you can start educating choices around that. And it's not that there are no people that are doing that, but the media is obviously inundated with things that look yummy. It's the Food Network model is still alive and well, as much as many of the mainstream media companies are trying to move towards healthy, because that's what the consumer, especially the millennial consumer, wants. But a lot of it is just, hey, there's this fake dichotomy of, it can be healthy or taste good. And so I think that the perception of it has to taste good, and therefore it can be, with lots of salt and sugar and fat, and it'd be okay. I think that is the thing that we have to get over. And then the nutritional analysis, it really is the power of data. If you measure it, you can change it. And I think that's what's happening to a lot of people. They're getting inundated with suggestions, or they're seeing their friends eat, but without understanding what that does. So part of what we do is actually provide the data so people can make those informed choices. When you find out that your Caesar salad is 1,200 calories, of which 600 come from fat, you would think twice whether you eat the entire Caesar salad, because that's maybe half of your daily needs. So that is the part that we I think are working on, is just get people the initial information so they can start measure against their own performance, and then their level of education beyond that. Obviously, what is good, how should I balance my diet, how many calories, and calories may be it's the accepted unit of measurement, but there are other things that you should be looking at, including micronutrients and macronutrients, and where you might have deficiencies, and so on and so forth, and where you may be consuming too much. So but it all starts with data and measuring. So that's I hope that answered the question. But
yeah, no, it absolutely does, and I'm glad to hear you mention that. Measuring data outside of just looking at calories, because in general, at least before the pandemic, majority of our decisions about diet, if we were going to kind of move in a healthier direction, were really based on just weight. Weight was the one thing that most people were concerned about. Now, we're concerned about building strong immune systems. So the consciousness has changed in that matter. But you mentioned micronutrients, and I can tell you just personally, trying to shop, whether I'm following a recipe or trying to just cook a specific meal, it would be almost impossible for me to collect all the data from each ingredient and to be able to calculate what those nutrients were, collectively, and even the macronutrients for that matter. So it sounds like there's a huge gap between these data points, and it needed to be some form of consolidation. So let's jump in, because it sounds like this is what Edamam does. Tell me a little bit more about the company and how it helps people to make better food choices.
Right. So I'll preface that with, first of all, we are a business to business company. So we're not directly interfacing with end consumers or patients or employees, but we interface with the companies that serve them. And we essentially organize and structure food and nutrition data, and we build on top of it solutions. So a typical solution is personalized meal recommendation. So we would take information about you. So maybe you say, I'm type 2 diabetic, or I'm paleo, I'm allergic to peanuts, I want something that's under 300 calories, low sodium, so on and so forth. And we can take all that on. Oh, by the way, I just bought asparagus and I don't like onions. So we can take all that, and we can start in real time providing suggestions of what you should be eating, what you should be cooking. So that's a little bit of a solution that our clients use. And it's usually used nowadays mostly in the context of chronic condition management and some wellness situations. But it is the model that can work for anyone, right? It's essentially personalization, and it's a very rudimentary personalization based on dietary preferences and nutrients, and down the road, obviously, genomics and microbiome and real-time blood chemistry can play a role in all that. So that's one. The other is real-time nutrition analysis, really just being able to take any text or speech about food and convert it into accurate nutrition analysis. So talking about you going and shopping and not knowing exactly all the nutrients. Well, if you just speak it into a phone of one of our clients, or type it in and you say, okay, well, I'm making a broccoli soup, and I get 2 stalks of broccoli and 1 onion and 4 cups of vegetable stock and so on and so forth. We can take all that and in real time actually provide you with the full macro and micronutrient information. So we'll try to make it very easy for you to access that information. We are not there yet where it's kind of like magically appears in front of your eyes when you think about it. Mm-hmm. But maybe, we'll partner with Neuralink from Elon Musk and try to make that like directly downloadable into your brain. But we get in there. We get in there.
Excellent. Okay. So you're primarily a B2B business model. And if a company is using your platform, can you tell me a little bit about the implementation? And I'm assuming the actual dashboard is what their customer or patient or client is using. So you have the businesses, I guess, who are the buyers, and you have the businesses, customers or patients, who are the users. So Correct. What is that implementation process, and what does that interface look like on the business side?
So on the business side, the actual user experience is usually a dashboard where people can do food logging and then tracking and get some recommendations of what they should eat. We essentially are the data engine behind that. And usually the implementation is depending on the use case. Some companies may just want to display nutrition data. Like, that we work like that with Food Network or New York Times Cooking or, catering companies, restaurants, and so on and so forth. They just need to display the nutrition data. And it's a very straightforward. We analyze their recipes and we provide the nutrition data. Other ones want to do real-time nutrition analysis for food logging, right? I got up this morning, I had a slice of bread with, a banana, 2 grapes, and a glass of orange juice. We can take all that and kind of create a nutrition analysis, and you can log it in as your breakfast. So that's another use case. And, as an interface that can be, speech to text kind of interface, or it can be just a type in. So either one works, that we've seen all kinds of implementations. And then the third one is the personalized recommendation is kind of driven by context. Some kind of budgeting is usually where things revolve around, like I have 2,000 calories to eat today, or I'm aiming at 35 carbs for the day, or I want to increase my iron content and so on and so forth. And knowing already what you had for breakfast, you put some parameters around the lunch. I want to have something that's 500 calories and, has X amount of iron and so on and so forth. We return data of meals that fit that. And essentially what it is, it's a suggestion, kind of a beautiful picture of a recipe or a food that you can cook or shop for. And that's how it gets implemented. The actual implementation with the business, it's through an API. They essentially access our data through an API. Some of them do license data sets because they want to kind of create an offline experience where they don't rely on an API. But one or the other, that's kind of the actual implementation.
I got you. So the businesses will utilize the API. They'll take their recipes and then it will process and generate the nutritional data for them so that the users will have easy access to it.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the use cases. Yeah.
Okay. I find it interesting because I'm deeply involved in nutrition myself because I'm trying to live my best life. And recently I went to the grocery store and I was looking at, I knew we were going to have this conversation, and I was looking at some of the packaged foods because I figured, okay, instead of me trying to shop for different items and then trying to add up all these things, I'm wondering if prepared foods would have all that nutritional data that you just mentioned would be available for anybody using your API. And, it was interesting what I found. The information was there, but it was inaccurate. I mean, grossly inaccurate. I had picked up a side dish of spanakopita, and it had the macronutrients. So it did mention the calories and the fats and the protein and the carb concentrations. But then when it got into the micronutrients, it mentioned B1 and B6, and it said 0%. So that was odd to mention something that was zero. And it didn't mention vitamin A and C and K, or magnesium and calcium, phosphorus, all the things that are really rich in magnesium. So I remember thinking like, oh, so here's this information, but it's dirty data. Like this isn't going to direct me in the direction that I want to go. So I'm wondering, is there you mentioned artificial intelligence, and I think you alluded to like machine learning that will help to construe cleaner data, where people can know without a doubt, especially, and I hate to say without a doubt, but maybe someone who's not just over the top about the nutritional stuff, that, hey, this stuff is actually accurate.
Yeah, well, that's the ideal world we are building towards. I think the problem is not technological, it's logistical. It is business and the incentives behind the business decisions around nutrition data. So a lot of those inaccurate labels that you find in grocery stores are put together by somebody doing a Google search online and just putting together data without it's the fastest and the cheapest. And really, there should be, especially they're sold in the grocery store, there's some regulation. But the enforcement of that regulation is very hard. And so I would venture a guess that about 50% of the items that are in grocery store have some kind of misleading, inaccurate information. Well, we have a solution that can solve that, but the question is, how do we get it into the hands of everybody that is making food out there? And that's the business problem, and that's what we're working towards. Is like eventually we want every food, health, and wellness business to use our platform so they can create accurate nutrition data. And we chipping at it every day, trying to create more relationships. Bigger companies are better because that way you reach more people. But eventually that's the goal. And we want to have, our little Edamam logo as kind of the good housekeeping seal of approval that is accurate data. But how do we get there? A lot of it is just daily knocking on doors, building relationships, growing the company, partnering with other companies. We fully recognize we're not going to build that world ourselves alone. We have to partner with like-minded companies and so on and so forth. And we do see a lot of receptivity even from the likes of Walmart and Kroger and companies of that stature. It is even for them harder to steer the ship around and help everybody around them. And in Walmart, I think has 20,000 suppliers, to actually help them get on board. And I have hope that this will happen. It's happening slower than I wish.
So is the problem they need to be able to process this information faster? And if that is the case, is that maybe one of the differentiators that you believe your company either today or the future may be able to solve?
Yeah, it's not even faster. It is a chore for companies to create the nutrition data. It shouldn't be. That's not the right motivation, but it is. It's because it's required. They put it. They put the bare minimum. That's why you don't have all the micronutrients. And it does cost money and time, which is just additional hurdle. So they try to, go dirt and cheap by just doing an online search and cobbling together things. We try to remove those hurdles. We try to make it super cheap and super fast. And that will kind of make it easy for them to create the labels fairly quickly. And so that's essentially how we're removing friction.
Yeah, I gotcha. I had a chance to, I understand that you're primarily a B2B company, and but you have the consumer facing element as well. I did get a chance to go onto the website, again, knowing that we were going to come on, and I wanted to look up a recipe, maybe something I could try even for myself. And it was nice to see, some of the, just how extensive the data was, especially from a micronutrient standpoint of it. I wanted to bring it up and kind of go over it with you, if you don't mind here.
With pleasure.
All right. So, I mean, this sounds yummy. Pumpkin, chickpea, and a coconut curry recipe sounds like it'd be a great side dish.
Yeah.
If anyone who's just listening to us and not following us here on YouTube. So basically, you go to Edamam and you can type in a recipe. And like most recipes, it gives you a picture up top. At the bottom of the picture, the page is really split into two pages. On the left side, you have a list of all the ingredients, and then some instructions on how to prepare the meal as you would with any other meal plan. But what's really fascinating, and for me, like where the magic really happens, is what's happening on the right-hand side of the page. So you have some macronutrients, and they're color-coded. You have fat, which is in red, carbs, which is in yellow, and protein, which is in green. And there's a very cool toolbar, kind of like a progress bar, if you can envision that. And it's filled proportionately to which of these macronutrients does this meal contain in the highest quantity. So without even being bogged down with the numbers, I can just look at the colors, right? And I can see, hey, this is mostly red. And this is actually a surprise to me that this is primarily a fat dish. I would have thought this was primarily a carb dish.
It's the coconut.
It's the coconut, absolutely. But then it dives into the micronutrients. We got sodium, calcium, magnesium. I kind of alluded to before, which was missing on my spanakopita trip to the grocery store. And then dives into the vitamins. I mean, it's extremely informative and data rich. Was the idea for it to be this extensive? When you saw this, in your mind on the beach in Thailand?
Yes, it actually is more extensive. First of all, those fat and carb tabs, they're open, the little triangles, and you can see the breakdown of the fats and the carbs.
Wow, absolutely.
But the actual data behind every recipe, and we have about 5 million recipes now in the database, has about 140 nutrients. So we have individual amino acids, fatty acids, polyphenols, things like that. We don't display that mostly because it's a case of too much information, for the everyday consumer. But it's available, and for some companies that are digging into the genomic space, that's valuable, and we actually share that data as well. Yes, I envisioned that, and I envision it a lot more. The nutrients that we now have associated with recipes are the known nutrients to the food science folks, as it were, the macro and micronutrients and, some of the more interesting molecules. But honestly, if you go and chemically analyze a clove of garlic, you would see that there are over 2,600 compounds there. And so we know a very small fraction of the chemical magic of a clove of garlic, so eventually, the vision of the company is let's go deep and figure out kind of a repository of every possible chemical compound out there, and where it's contained in what foods, because essentially that's nature's pharmacy, right? It's some of those compounds may be triggering, cellular rejuvenation, and we just don't know. I mean, people know it, that garlic is good for you to fend off, certain illnesses and to boost immunity, but how and why, nobody knows. What it requires is data, right? We need to have the data, first of all, the compounds, which is our job. And then we need to have the data about humans eating garlic to figure out what actually is happening. But that's the overall vision. It really dig deep into the chemistry and then into the biology and see how food actually can heal us, can rejuvenate us, can, help us avoid illness, and so on and so forth. So that's the vision.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm really excited to hear about Edamam getting in the hands of more organizations, because it sounds like more of us could use them. It sounds like even the government needs to be involved. We need Amazon and Whole Foods on board. We need all hands on deck. As you try to get Edamam exposed to more businesses, I'm really curious, and I'm quite sure this would benefit a lot of other entrepreneurs, specifically in the digital health space, to become better negotiators? I'm quite sure you've been able to develop some process or some strategies as you sat down with a lot of these big name brands and just these different business sectors, because it sounds like you're involved in a lot of different markets, because health is a business now that a lot of people are really gravitating towards. Are there any I don't know, strategies that have helped you either in your mental preparation or what your expectations are as you walk into these negotiation sessions?
Yeah, there are two primary layers to that. And one is you can think of it as strategy and tactics, or kind of the base, and then the actual implementation. I think the base is very important, and it is essentially a skill that any entrepreneur has to have to succeed. And it is not to get too excited or too downbeat based on what happens in the business day to day. So I do have a daily meditation practice and lots of other things. And like I said, I've been over 20 years an entrepreneur. So I've had a lot of experience to, lots of lessons I learned along the way to get to that point. But essentially, you have to have a clear mind and expectations that allow you to approach any negotiation with any size company as just another day in the office. And not get too, beaten up because they just said no the next 9 times as well. That's that, which brings me to the second point, which is persistency, which is another skill that you have to learn as an entrepreneur. It's basically there's only 2 things you need to do to be a successful entrepreneur. You have to have passion for what you do, and you have to be persistent. And so if you execute on both of those, I think it might not be in 3 years, it might be in 13 or 23, but you will be successful. So part of it is not giving up. So if you were to do a deal with Microsoft or Amazon or Food Network or New York Times, like we've done, it's been just being persistent, going and saying, hey, we think you need a solution, and this is how we think. And then it comes to tactics. You have to talk to a lot of people. Don't try just one channel, especially with big organizations. You have to approach it from as many entry points as possible. So talk to as many people as possible. Try to be helpful, not to sell. Try to understand the person. I mean, those are all kind of, by the book, selling tactics, but try to be helpful to the person, understand who they are, not the organization, but the person that's actually going to write you the check, who they are, what their role in the organization is, how they succeed, and so on and so forth. And then the final element, and I think that might be something that is unique for us, and it's probably just my experience. Very early on, we learned not to step back just because you are a multi-billion-dollar company and you can squish us, with lowering up to the nth degree. We're not just going to back off and, give you what you need. We'll stand our ground and say, this is a fair deal, and be willing to walk away if it doesn't work out. And that has served us well, because that has put us in a place where we can, for the long term, partner up with those companies. Otherwise, it becomes untenable. It's like any relationship. So those are the lessons I would say I have learned. Be persistent, be unperturbed. As unattached, as the Buddhists would say, to any outcome, and then try as many entry points. Be helpful, and then stand your ground.
No, I love it. I think those are some really great tips. I'm quite sure many people will find value in everything that you just mentioned. I know I did before. I think I maybe had on my list thick skin and have a short-term memory, but the clear thinking I love. I recently started meditating too, and I agree. I mean, it does wonders for helping you with mental clarity throughout the day, especially among challenges. So what do you envision for Edamame in the future and moving forward?
So like anything, I have an approach towards life just being unfolding. And I know that's not the answer most venture capitalists or investors want to hear, but I can see this company in 50 years being a multi-billion-dollar company that really is helping educate the food choices of everybody on the planet, because we work with every food health and wellness business, and be the place that accurate nutrition data resides. So it sounds like a grandiose ambition, but if we execute well, that's what we're building towards. Now, by the same token, if in 3 or 4 years a big company that is aligned with our mission comes and says we want to buy the business, I have no qualms. I look at the business as a child. At some point, they need to exit the house, go to college, and start living their life. So I'm open to all outcomes, but what I am partial to is that the mission of the company continues living on. And so we help people make smart food choices. We help everybody on the planet live to 120 at least, without chronic conditions, without mental illness. So that's kind of what I'm excited about.
Living long with a great quality of life. I love it. Listen, Victor, I think that's probably a great place for us to stop for today. I want to thank you for coming on and speaking with me. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. I wish you and Edamam the best of luck in the future. If people want to learn more about you and learn more about Edamam itself, where can they go to learn more?
So obviously edamam.com. For businesses, developer.edamam.com would be the right place. That's where B2B products reside. For myself, I generally am not the self-promoting type. Anything that I do on social is related to the business, but LinkedIn is the best place, and you can just find me by name there. And if you, like me, are interested in longevity, food health, ping me. I'd love to connect.
That's definitely right up my alley. Would love to do that. And for anybody who missed any of those handles and websites that were mentioned, you could also go to our website, thedigitalhealthcast.com. We're on social media as well, on Instagram, here on YouTube, as well as Twitter. You can find us at Digital Healthcast. Victor, again, thank you for being a guest here on the show. I wish you the best of luck. That's all we have.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.